we're looking at the trends in the industry, and that can be from various directions, but to look at what they feel some of the trends are, where they feel some of the vulnerabilities are, and where they feel some of the opportunities are going forward. And then we'll throw it open to the floor for you to ask questions. And if when you do, as Paul mentioned, if when you do, you actually just tell us who you are, which company you are, and we'll endeavour to pass that on. Please don't ask commercial information, because you already know the answer and you're not going to get it. So what we'll do is kick off from the far left.
Okay.
My left, that is, sorry.
Good afternoon, I'm Phil Hutton from Tyco Security Products. I've been in the industry since I was about 18, so probably 6 or 7 years now. Mainly in the CCTV side of the industry, and more recently moved into the IP side of the industry. As far as trends go, I think that's a very wide question, but some of the trends that we see coming our way are migration now of recording to the camera end, particularly for smaller systems, and doing it with the MVRs. Migration to smaller systems being mounted in the cloud, rather than having physical hardware in premises anymore. And those are some of the things I think that are going to affect our business going forward, in a positive way, I hope.
Hi, I'm Dale Bridgman. I work for Tyco Security Products as well. I look after just one brand, though, CM brand, Access Control. I've been in the industry for about 21 years now. Pretty much always just looking after access control. I've worked for a few access control manufacturers in the past. So the trends in our industry is people are moving to a single credential for multiple applications. So your smart card is becoming kind of key to your systems and your use. That can also have its own sort of headaches and problems. Card security is now becoming an issue because of information that's held or stored on that card. So that's something that needs to be opened up and looked at. That's it, really. Andrew?
My name is Julian Inman. I'm the support manager for a company called Exact. Many of you sit through my presentation earlier. Exclusively for CCTV, electronic security for the last 27-ish years, through an old company some of you will remember called Baxall, then through Dedicated Micros, and been with Exact now about 18 months. In terms of trends, I would certainly echo Phil's thing with regards to recording going both ways, out to the camera and up to the cloud. I think there are challenges certainly on the cloud, getting that accepted as an acceptable technology and where the data is going to be held. And me as an enterprise, am I happy for my video information to be held? So that's from a philosophical point of view. The other is a technological point of view. It's all very well and good doing things like normal business data being held in that manner, but when we're generating hundreds of megabytes, gigabytes, etc., and we've got to transmit and store it for extended periods, then that obviously presents us with the cliche challenges and opportunities. And then the other one I would add is intelligence, having more intelligence, video analytics that work, video analytics that delivers real benefit, I would say is the other big thing, because it's going to give us reductions in costs, reductions and improvements in revenues for our businesses, which is our customers, which is what they're always open to listening to.
I'm Peter Curry from Milestone Systems. I think this is an industry that's grown up together, so yet again I've been in it for sort of 20 years and we're all growing old together in it. Regarding innovation and what we're looking at, I'm afraid both Phil and Julian have stolen my thunder really, because that's what I was going to talk about. Whether we need it or not as an industry is another thing, but certainly manufacturers we're seeing looking at the cloud and at pushing more and more to the edge. I think as processors get bigger and better and storage gets smaller and smaller, we will see more of it. Whether it's driven by the industry or whether it's driven by needs, another thing altogether. I think it's a while off, to be honest with you, but certainly companies like Milestone, Exact, etc. are scaling up for it. We understand that perhaps that's the way it goes, and that's the industry, I'm afraid. It's not invented yet, but we all believe that it'll be interesting when it is. So that's it.
Tony Aldridge from Control, like the others, growing old in the industry. I've been with communications industry for nearly 20 years. Background initially in serial comms, serial across Ethernet, and now switches. In terms of changes in the industry, I think inexorably we're moving more and more to the IP side of things, the benefits of those. I think more studies will be done in terms of the cost effectiveness, and that I think will guide us as an industry.
Okay.
Andrew Denton, I'm the sales manager for Meatech Limited, UK manufacturer of control solutions and VMS solutions. I think I must be the junior member here. I've only been in the industry about 12 years now since I left university, so I'm not quite as long as the old duffers on my left here.
You're a big paper left. It was a big paper left.
And just looking at sort of trends in the industry, I think over the last few years the major trend we've seen is the merging of security and IT departments. And this is basically meaning that the security systems now are being driven by the IT department, and we're seeing even what is relatively new technology over recent years in DVRs and MVRs now coming towards end of life, and people moving towards sound storage and things like that. So all moving towards the IT manager's view on things rather than the security system.
Interesting comments, and of course I've got a presentation later on this afternoon where we look at some of the standards issues. Notice nobody mentioned standards there, but I'm sure it was implicit in every one of your statements. But I'd like to offer it up to the floor now. We've got 10-15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, to take this forward, so happy to take any questions. Who would like to start us off?
It's down to me again, as usual.
Not that we've rehearsed it, but Paul, what would you think?
One question to the entire panel is, what do you think the major reason is for the slow acceptance of IP video, and why aren't we seeing wholesale deployment of IP video at the moment?
Who'd like to start?
I think skill sets got something to do with that, and the fact that a lot of system integrators historically have been comfortable dealing with analog video, and maybe haven't been quick enough getting up on the IP technologies. Also, the reluctance on the part of some IT managers to take on CCTV with the huge bandwidth requirements that it's often seen as requiring. So I think there's on both sides of the wall there's reasons for not wanting to move the technologies together.
I think it's a geographical thing as well. Certain regions that we deal in are exclusively IP, and others are heavily, those that are entrenched in analog, and they have been dragged kicking and screaming into the IP world. So it depends how much analog is actually being deployed. I think it affects where we are currently.
I think also as an industry we've not seen any real drivers to warrant the change wholesale into the IP marketplace until better resolution cameras came along, and that now gives us a real benefit to move to IP. We've got megapixel cameras and beyond megapixel cameras, and it gives you a real advantage and a real reason to choose an IP solution.
Milestone have been IP from day one. That's all we do. Of course, we encode analog cameras, so there's an awful lot of latency. There's an awful lot of legacy equipment out there that we see come back. Other than that, I think we've broken the back of it. I believe IP is mainstream now. I think you'd be daft to specify anything new that wasn't IP. Now, I would say that from where I come from, and I would say that I don't see analog systems. I just don't see them anymore. But maybe that's because of the area I'm in, but I think we have broken the back of it. I think people now can see the true benefits of it. It's taken a while to skill up, that's true. It's certainly true that the skill shortage was an issue, but the adoption of megapixel and HD cameras really has driven it into the market. People have skilled up, certainly within our first early partners. They tended to be IT companies or IT savvy engineers that have pulled off and done it on their own. And within Milestone, they were by far the best partners, to be honest with you. But more and more now, companies are skilling up. and I don't really see it as an issue. It's more of an issue in the UK, but I think that's purely down to the fact that we were a very early adopter of CCTV and an embracer of CCTV, and there was a lot of legacy equipment out there. It's as simple as that. And interestingly, I worked primarily within the local authority market for years at a company called Petards, so I knew that market very well. And when I walked into Milestone, I didn't even bother going to talk to those guys, because the problems they had, I couldn't resolve. And the problem they would throw at me was, oh, there's legacy in the image, I can't do anything with this, it's not as good as I had before. Which they had a point, because there's only so much engineering out of latency you can do. But what I feel now is there's an acceptance of that. The benefits outweigh the negatives now, and we're seeing acceptance even in that entranced marketplace, the local authority. Any other comments from the left?
I just wonder whether enough studies have been done about full lifetime costs of the comparative systems. We all know that analog cameras are cheaper than IP cameras as a rule. Whether further studies, I've only seen one in the last 2 or 3 years, which made a direct comparison between new contracts comparing the two systems. I'm wondering whether other camera manufacturers or systems integrators could and should be doing more detailed cost studies to get over this problem of, well, an analog camera is always cheaper.
I think echoing that, and for those of you who don't know me, I chair the Standards Committee in the United States for transportation security. So we have 350,000 users, members, that is, 400 operators, many of them law enforcement agencies. And Homeland Security asked us about 5 or 6 years ago to develop a standard. And we produced that and ratified that in 2011. It takes a long time to develop standards. And we produced an update in March. And that update has actually stepped away from analog cameras and actually recommended 720p as the minimum resolution that we will accept. And certainly in my day job, certainly from the projects that we're reviewing for compliance and for design architecture, we are seeing real benefits for IP camera installations, which, as you rightly say, look at the lifetime cost. We use a ratio of approximately 3-to-1 benefit. So we can get rid of 3 analog cameras for every single IP camera that we install, given that it's got wide field of view and so on. But most designs that I see around the world that we're asked to comment on, we're asked to help architect, are IP based. Yes, there's a lot of projects in public sector that have legacy and have a duty and responsibility to sweat the asset to make sure they get best value and integrate that into a better control system, which is why my committee is now moving forward with an integrated software control room standard. Note I didn't say PSIM or advanced VMS, but an integrated software control standard to make sure that we make better use of it. So the point I'm trying to make is that we're seeing in the transport industry projects and RFPs which are purely IP based. I have not seen, aside from replacement, I have not seen any new installs for analog. India and Asia are different. There's a different criteria there. I'll come on to that later. Any other questions?
Can I make another? Can I follow on from that?
Okay. I'm taking a question from the floor.
Carry on.
Hi, Jeff Colley from Water. Do you not feel that the drive in analog still is driven by the M&Es and the race to the bottom, cheapest first, and having that written into the specifications, that is a cut and paste from documents that were around 10 years ago? We deal a lot with the building industry, and certainly that is the case in the fact that they don't know about what the IP solution is, so they go with what they know. When you're talking to stick in the word building contractors, they only know that, so that's what they specify and that's what they go out to tender for. Is the panel of the same view?
Yeah, I think so. I see I see specifications, quite a few coming across my desk now that are asking for full IP systems and the strengths of them, but are still asking for D1 resolution, and I just can't quite believe they are, because personally I think D1 resolution in 10 years' time we'll laugh at it, and we'll say it's not fit for purpose. How on earth could you ever secure a conviction or make any, get any information out of a D1 image, as we do when we look at sort of old multiplexers that were producing one image every 2 or 3 seconds at CIF or QCIF. So yeah, no, I'm surprised about that actually.
I can answer why that's there. The D1 image requirement is actually a legal requirement in the UK. Under Road Traffic Act 2002, there is an enforcement standard, because this costs Westminster a fortune. There is an enforcement standard that says the minimum resolution of an image used for enforcement has to be D1. That's the minimum, which is equivalent to SD or 480p. That doesn't say you can only have D1, but it means you have to record at that level as well, and that's another discussion point. But anybody else like to take that point?
I'm going to ask the question why that is, and why those people that are vending high quality systems haven't done a better job at educating.
It's our fault.
That's your fault.
Yes, thank you.
Well,
Not solely, I would say.
Yeah, sure.
It does tend to come down the path of least resistance, I think, a lot of the time. You stipulate what's easiest, what you know,
And risk, what
Yeah.
risks are you prepared to manage?
Well, I think that's the big issue with building companies, is that when the major company or the client passes that across to the building company, they then sign off on that, and that building then doesn't go back to them until it's handed over. And whatever's handed over at that time is mitigated on risk for 5-10 years in the future. So it doesn't matter whether it's an analog camera or an IP camera, provided that meets the standard and it mitigates the risk, that's what they're comfortable with. And it's against their insurance policies. If they put something in that is state of the art and then they have to mitigate that, then there's a big risk there. So they go back to where the risk isn't, and I think that's why we're still seeing analog cameras specified.
Any other questions from the floor? Yeah.
Ben Killeen from GBD, Making IP Easy. The question for the panel, a lot of you have spoken about trends, I suppose, of edge recording and then recording to the cloud. Is recording to the cloud really a trend that's kind of here yet? Is the technology not here, I suppose, a long time before we're going to be ready for recording anything more than 1 or 2 cameras to the cloud with the bandwidth we have available in this country and indeed throughout the rest of Europe?
Good question. Good question.
Well, that was my point about, yes, some people want to do it, but we aren't there ready either with bandwidth or the storage out there at an affordable price. So, yeah, I think you're quite right.
I'm not convinced of the need there either, and this is a personal view, but to me it seems like some big people are moving into this marketplace, because they look at 40 million households in the UK and see, well, 2 cameras in each household, that's an awful lot of cameras, it's an awful lot of business, but I don't know if we'll ever get there. Yes, we'll get more and more used to hosting stuff outside our own control. We already do. Anyone with an iPhone knows already that their settings and their cameras are held in the cloud if they want them to, and most people utilise that. But I'm not sure the need's there. I think it needs to be driven by the need, really, as well as the technologies need to catch up as well.
a lot of it's going to rest with the likes of IT, isn't it? So you need to have the broadband lines have got to be in place at the bandwidth required to stream the video into the cloud. I think there's another side of it which tends to be that recording video images tends to need a fixed amount of storage, and it doesn't really matter whether that storage is in the cloud or is local. A lot of people get hung up on the idea of sharing the cost of things between different systems, which is fine if there's variable amounts of processing and things like that required on servers, but where CCTV tends to require a fixed amount of storage and of bandwidth and things like that, there's not really the benefits of sharing those services with other services.
It's a problem if you get a situation, particularly in the public space, where police perhaps wants to do bulk recovery, if it is recorded in the cloud, you've no longer got your arms around your own data. It's hidden somewhere. And I think that will be a resistance to moving to the cloud for the larger systems, particularly. But certainly on smaller systems, there are products around now that can record in the cloud. There's a company that's partnered Microsoft, the product's called Azure, that does record in the cloud, and it's designed for up to 4 cameras. And if you've got a megabit going upstream from your house, you can put a couple of cameras on that and record them remotely.
I think that also emphasizes the point of the necessity for systems design. What is your system being used for, and how do you intend to use it? Whilst we have all of these capabilities and systems and recording technologies, what is that system going to be used for? If you're in public sector and you're subject to a freedom of information request, a FOIA request, you have to produce that information to that whoever, and that could very well end up in court. So therefore, that statement is it has to be D1 because that's the minimum enforcement standard, you would think. Now, unfortunately, an awful lot of public sector managers don't even recognize that, they don't even understand that. But it is then onerous on the systems architects to ask that very fundamental question: what is it you want to do? And how do you want to do it? If you're a domestic user that only wants to look to see if your car is still on your drive because you're overseas, or that the kids are still playing in the garden, or whatever, that's a different requirement to somebody looking at open space to see if they could recognize the license plate on a car that just mowed somebody down. Different requirements, different standards, and of course, just going to the point about local storage, certainly from our point of view in transport, we have a mandatory requirement to store at the full resolution locally. In the event that that image has to be recovered, it's there. What you do when you squeeze it and push it over a network is a different discussion. You were going to ask a question?
Yes, we're currently installing cameras and recording them to the cloud for our construction company that is our main parent company. On average, we have 5 cameras that record at 720p, and they only want 2 frames per second. But I have to keep those images for 2.5 years because it covers the whole thing. Now, my concern is that full 2.5-year period requires 25 terabytes of storage, and costs are obviously high and everything else. And my concern is there going to be any future development in compression standards other than H.264 to try to match that down so it'd be like 5 terabytes or something? Because there's also bandwidth issues and everything else.
265, of course, is almost here, so that's a statement there. But that roughly halves it. Yeah,
it's inevitable, isn't it? I mean, technology's going to move on. There is going to be better compression techniques. That's technology. It's inevitable that over the next 10 years that will happen.
Yeah.
But the question I think you have to ask your client is, in storing it, when you recover it from storage, because you want to look at something, what are you going to do with that image? Because if you've super compressed it, you've touched it, if it has to go into a court of law, there could be an argument that it's inadmissible because you touched it.
Oh, no, it's not.
If that's not the case, then
it's not about security, it's about the build of the building.
Oh, okay.
The concern is that they're now talking about having something like 18 to 20 cameras, and without a better compression format, I'm looking at 25 or 30 meg of data, for bandwidth streams. So.
I say there's another force at play as well, and that it's not always driven from the need that we know now. A lot of it's driven from the technical capability that is being developed, and we've got a technology now. How are we going to use it and get some money out of it? So things are put up as loss leaders almost, and that's what evolves into commercial products in the future. PCs have done that for many years, and I was on a treadmill of upgrading my PC just to play the latest game. I didn't need to play the latest game, but I wanted to. And I'm sure the chip manufacturers, that necessitated a new motherboard, a new processor, a new graphics card, and it was just a loop I was going around. And I'm sure that's there's a roadmap for all of the IT manufacturers that are doing this, all of the transmission manufacturers. They need to produce bigger, better, faster mousetraps, and then they need to find a way of using them and making us pay for them in the future.
Any other responses from the panel? Yeah, question there.
You talk about D1 being a minimum requirement for court use. Is there a minimum requirement as in frames per second?
Well, it's interesting you said, we were chatting outside, of course. The answer is no. From our point of view, we have a standard that actually puts that in place for application. So if we have a requirement to observe images inside a rail vehicle or inside a bus, we have prescribed minimum frame rates as well as the minimum resolution, and also empirical testing to make sure you meet those requirements using Rotokin or similar. In the UK, the enforcement standard there, of course, is for specific purposes. So it's a single frame that has to show the vehicle, the front seat passenger, and has to be at a minimum resolution of D1. You only need a frame, because that's what the yellow box is going to deliver on the side of the road. And if you take a still from a video camera, then clearly that needs to make sure it meets that requirement too. So the long and short of it is, in that particular situation with the Road Traffic Act 2002, it's D1 because it's a single image.
Do you think it will change?
It depends whether or not, in the UK I don't think so. There may very well be recommendations that say, for this type of application you should do this, but certainly some of the people that I've been talking to at governmental level who are looking at these standards here in the UK and indeed in Europe are looking at weasel words that say fit for purpose, for want of a better expression. What does that mean is the answer. And you know, in certain applications where industry groups are available, that means different things to different people. You know, when we're looking at a camera that's looking forward-facing out of a rail vehicle, let's say a light rail vehicle that's in traffic, we want that running at full frame rate. We do not want it frame reduced, because it's pointless having it if you're going to run it at 12 frames a second rather than 25. In our case, in the US, it's 30. And so there are those sorts of requirements that we've looked at as an industry standards body that say that's for our industry. And there are other industry standards groups out there, I'm sure, that are looking at the same thing. But as far as we speak, in the UK, the requirement is D1 enforcement, a single image. If anybody else knows any different, then please speak up.
I think it's a single image to be delivered, but you've got to provide what's necessary recorded to get that single image.
Absolutely, yeah, and it could be
that
two fields,
depending on the speed of the object you're trying to record.
Actually, to be fair, when you're actually doing it for speed enforcement, it has to be two images, one a second apart. You know, that's why the bars are on the road.
Yeah.
What it is for the average speed camera, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sort of talking about cameras, city centres or whatever. I mean, if you're actually viewing a moving image, whether it's a knife attack or something, a lot can have changed between the first image.
Oh yeah.
And the second.
Who threw the first punch? I agree.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, we tend to, certainly in that environment, it tends to be 12.5 images a second. Half real time is generally the way.
It almost becomes more important than the resolution.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, you need to know who threw the first punch. I mean, in the case of certainly transport agencies, is literally, did he jump or was he pushed? That's the first question that's always asked in what we call a one under. You were going to ask a question.
Yes, David. It's to do with the legislation that you're working on. I know that in the States, as we move more to the cloud with our recording and storage now, there are different requirements within different countries. Now, if a company is working cross-country, there is different storage legislation for those images coming back. How is that going to be dealt with in the future, in your mind, as to how companies deal with that, where it's 24 hours in France, or 48 hours in Germany, and 31 days in the UK, etc., etc.?
And I think the only answer to that is the one you'd expect, and that is you're going to have to deal with the judicial requirements of the territory you're in as appropriate. A lot of these requirements are minimums. So there's nothing to say you can't put it at 31 frames in a country that has, let's say, 3 as a minimum. I mean, even in the States we have waivers. We have a waiver in California, for example, because they're hit with freedom of information requests on a regular basis, daily. So the transport agency there, the guy's pulling his hair out because it costs him $300 or $400 an application. The user only pays $100. He has to spend hours going to find it. And so what they've got is a waiver for 72 hours. And they tell them, because an awful lot of the requests are actually nothing to do with transit crime. They're actually to do with divorce cases or some other. Well, a bus goes past the house, you can use your own imagination. We're looking for cars usually, not anything more graphic than that. But they also pull the images off of the street side cameras, the wayside cameras, and everything. They want the whole lot. They want a package, and they'll go off and analyze it themselves. But that takes a lot of time. So they have turned around and said, sorry, even in the face of our standard, that they say, but we've got a waiver. Dave signed it. Hadn't that much choice. But when you go to places like West Africa, or you go to places like the Middle East or Asia, they are usually looking to somebody for guidance about how much they should keep. I was speaking to some folks here earlier in the week about our own legal requirements for evidence, and you would be shocked at the length of time you have to retain evidence. I mean, we are talking tens and tens of years, and that includes visual evidence. I mean, if you want to buy a few 5 1/4-inch floppies, I'm sure I've got a couple in my garage. Therein lies a problem. What medium are we going to be looking at in 30 years? And there are requirements that have that around them.
Do you think that legislation will change?
Slowly. I mean, you're talking about a legislative body that's asking for evidence, and we're just part of the evidential chain. The one thing that is increasing, though, in what we're doing, and Milestone and others have facilities to upload information. We've seen it in many recent cases from the street where terrorists get voiced opinions directly to live TV in minutes. What those people don't realize is if your device becomes evidence, then you are going to have to potentially submit that device as part of the case, and so you'll lose it for a little while because they need it as part of their evidence. You can't just say, send me the file. Yeah, that's great, but I need the device. So those are sorts of trends that we're seeing, and that's an increasing trend now, is understanding how we upload those massive amounts of data from members of the public who have 8 megapixel, 5 megapixel, whatever devices in their hands. We offer it as a benefit to for workers as well. Certainly the transport industry, if your workers are equipped with devices that accept messages and have the ability to make photographs, then it's easy, let's say for a police officer, to take a handheld device, click, send, and his control room now has a picture of what's going on. Any other responses to that? One more opportunity for a last question, because I'm conscious of the time. Yeah.
I'd be interested, maybe a question perhaps more for the network, but the panel as a whole. Jerry Morgan, security consultant, consultants at Rockline. Obviously, a few years ago, closed-circuit CCTV meant exactly that. And then we sort of put various providers on that have got some sort of network connectivity, and now we're looking at IP solutions for any size of business, really, if they're interested in it. And obviously, some of those businesses are going to have integrated security solutions where there's other security systems on the same network that talk to their CCTV system. What does the panel think about the balance between security, IT security, to prevent hacking across the internet or hacking from other sort of close proximity over wireless connections, and the balance between usability and remote access for the client?
Well, it is a balance, and I'm going to just talk generally really. I mean, we get involved in this quite a lot. We get involved with obviously hardened servers, we get involved with firewalls, and there's certain stuff we have to enable and disable within firewalls to achieve that. It's a moving feast because, as you're aware, the technology changes and hacking technologies change. I think we're fairly comfortable with it at the moment, but it is a moving feast, and it is something that we have to be aware of. Other than that, I've not much more to say on that. It's something we get involved with a lot. I guess you do as well, Julie, because it's very important to organisations. But it's pretty bespoke in the fact that every organisation takes a different view on that, and every IT department takes a different view on that. Whether that's a separate domain, whether it's an extremely hardened and firewalled environment, whether it's, believe it or not, moving a camera across a coax, because that's the only true diode they can do, and going back to coax versus IP or analog versus IP, it really is piece by piece, but it's certainly a consideration. Julian?
I would agree with that, yes. One of the main usable benefits of IP is its ability to be viewed anywhere. So you aren't going to stop that happening. You just need to make sure that it's going to be done in a secure fashion. Otherwise, you're just going to lose the whole benefit of, or one of the major benefits of having that kind of technology in place. So you just have to go through the pain of making sure it's secure. But that then represents a huge opportunity to us to actually make sure it is done that in a skilled way. Or we choose products that have facilities within it that make it happen automatically.
There? No.
I mean, from an access point of view, depending on, of course, the product manufacturer, speak for ourselves, and anything we send over the network is encrypted anyway, so it's encrypted point to point. That can be nowadays, can be straight from the credential from the card, there's an encryption all the way from the card holder right down to that transaction in our database. So there's always, I think most manufacturers are the same, but that's on the network or not. There should just make sure that there is levels of encryption across the whole system. But to make it usable, you're right, we then just send an IP cable to the CCTV system. Here's an IP address, look, I've got a camera. But I think, as I was saying earlier, that as long as you get involvement from the IT people, so that things are locked down, and it can be done to make sure that only the relevant people have access, or like say we put more VLANs or separate domains, or every sees a network as a single piece of copper cable, which it is, but that can still be segregated and secured independently of everything else. So generally, what happens with the security system, you may be using the same copper cable, but it is generally restricted away from other parts of the business. Things like Wi-Fi now, I suppose, are never a great idea to put on anyway. I was working on a large project recently where they were actually thinking of deploying Ethernet over power in a large corporate building. And the IT, this was the sort of security and infrastructure people, facilities people, and the IT people went nuts. You can't have my network sat at a plug socket. Somebody could actually plug a device in and potentially hack our corporate environment. So you do have to be careful, things do have to be looked at.
I think sometimes as well, the bit of the equation that we miss is it's fairly easy if you're working in a bank to ban external connections to from an IP perspective and no Wi-Fi. But we don't often think hard enough about the people that are actually monitoring the system. Within the building, people that are in the security system itself, and sometimes they could be the greatest threat. Working with the government at the moment, trying to get one of our products CPNI specified, and it's very complex the way that they look at a security system compared to the way that we look at a security system, because we tend to assume that the people within the building are the people that we're trying to protect. Now, it could equally be those people that are trying to break into the system, and it's quite easy once you get access to a server or something like a FireWire port, you can very easily hack into the system and defeat the whole object of it. So it's a very valid point. You need to protect it.
Johnny, final question, final responses?
Yeah, I think it basically comes down to providing the same protection that you would if you were providing remote workers with dial-in facility to the corporate network. They've got to be provided with secure access, secure VPN or whatever to dial in to access the company's files. The same applies for the video side of it, and protecting that environment, that VLAN on the corporate network.
Yeah, I think there's intrinsic security within the IP system itself, authentication and encryption and decryption. There's also some of the things that I alluded to in my talk, that there are particular facilities within a switch that you can set particular IP addresses, particular MAC addresses as the only people that can have access to that particular port. So there's things at the general IP level, and there's things associated at the switch level, setting up VPNs, setting up VLANs and the like. All of these need to be taken into account, and we do need to talk to the IT man.
I think as well, just to add to that, from a standards point of view, we do strongly recommend that cybersecurity be an intrinsic part of the system's design, rather than just assuming you're simply going to hang it on to somebody else's IT network, which in reality is not a practical way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm constantly overrun by 10 minutes, but I want to encourage taking the final few questions there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We're now going to revert back to the standard presentations, and of course I think there will be another Ask the Guru session in London. Paul, not if that, yes, it's definitely going to happen next time. So if you are attending, store your questions up. If not, if you're part of the panel, thank you so much for your perseverance. There were no cabbages, there was no fights, which is better than last time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.